the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The Stevens Institute of Technology is proud to present the Hugo New Corporation Sustainability Seminar Series, brought to you by Brown and Caldwell, Geocetic Consultants, H2M Architect and Engineers, BEM Systems, and Catalyst Group.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for having me. And what I thought I would do is just basically keep this pretty informal and just tell a few stories across the arc of my career that kind of really led to where I am today, which is as the leader of the Climate Resilience and Sustainability National Business Line for WSP USA. I started my career as an engineer, bachelor's from University of Connecticut, and I went right to Connecticut DOT, which is a great job to see how government works and also to see how bureaucracy can be a bit of a challenge and a frustration, especially for people who are really go-getters and want to move quickly. And one of the big things, well, really two big things I took away from Connecticut DOT that are relevant to this conversation today are that one, you need to always be learning, and whatever job you have, whether it's in the public sector or private sector, always take advantage both during your workday, but also if they offer opportunities to go to conferences, or in my case with Connecticut DOT, they even paid for my master's, which I did at night. And even though my undergrad was more focused on civil, structural, and geotechnical, I really started to find a passion for environmental issues during my master's, and as I worked on some sites that had some real environmental challenges. So I did my master's that kind of combined geotechnical with hydrogeology, and purposely took courses outside of the engineering curriculum. Obviously, the School of Geology being part of that, but also I even took some courses on corrosion and things like that, the impact of chemicals on materials, and that became kind of the building block towards my moving in a direction from traditional civil engineering more towards environment and environmental issues while I was at Connecticut DOT for 5 years. The other big takeaway from my time at Connecticut DOT was this human nature that is everywhere. I don't care where you go, you will see this to varying degrees, which is resistance to change. And large government organizations, it really is prevalent. One example was I was asked to do a field load test of a foundation element that had been installed, where you load it up over the period of a few days and you measure how it reacts to the load and whether it settles or not. And basically I said, so this is my first time doing a load test. Are there techniques or equipment I should get myself familiar with and things like that? And they said, oh yeah, go over in that filing cabinet over there in the corner, and you'll see a folder in there, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about doing load tests. So I open up the folder and, dust and cobwebs fly out as I open it up. And there's this old piece of paper with some instructions and an old form that was dated 1965, which is 1 year after I was born. And here we were in the late 1980s. I'm doing my first job, and I'm confronted with this piece of paper that shows that they've been doing it the same way for decades. And I said, so there's never been any innovations or changes or new equipment I could use or take advantage of? No, why would you want to do that, Tom? We've been doing it this way forever. It works. Just do it the way we've always done it. And I have several other examples of that during my time at Connecticut DOT, but it's just organizational and it's human in its nature that people, unless somebody is really pushing and is forcing them, they won't really get outside the way it's always been done, or at best their current day, and really project themselves into the future, which, for sustainability, that's just a critical flaw, right? If you as an organization or you as an individual can't really project yourself into the future and see that tomorrow may be very different than today, let alone 50 years from today being very different than today, how can you possibly have a sustainability mindset? So that I became frustrated by that in my time at Connecticut DOT, and even though I got many good things out of that 5 years I spent there, including my professional engineer's license and my master's degree, I knew that I needed to move into the private sector. And as soon as I got my PE license, I in fact did that. I moved to New Jersey, and my first job in the private sector was with Dewberry, which Steve Egan just spent a long time there as well. So he knows Dewberry well. And I was there back in the early 90s, and at that time, it was very much an old school engineering consulting firm. Didn't even really have an environmental practice at that time. Now it does. In fact, Steve was part of it. But when I was there, didn't have an environmental practice. It did have a very small geotechnical practice. And so I became their chief geotechnical engineer in the New York metro area. And really, started to learn what it was like to be in the private sector. And again, I saw that they were very comfortable in what they were doing and how they did. And they were very good at it. But I also learned that what you have today and what you're good at today and is basically giving you your livelihood may radically shift at a moment's notice. So about 1 year into my time at Dewberry, I was working on many projects, one of which was the Dulles Toll Road, which is this huge P3 program before P3 was really even prevalent in the US. So it was a real great project. And it was so big that everybody in the company just about was working on it to some degree. They even though I was their geotech engineer, they even asked me to design a couple small bridges because they didn't have enough structural engineers. So I dusted off my old structural engineering books and asked a lot of questions. And I actually designed a short span bridge on the Dulles Toll Road. And things were going well. And then one day we got a call from that client right in the middle of the project. We were nowhere near done with it. And basically they had run into some funding problems and some other issues that were causing them pause. And so they called up Dewberry and said, stop work immediately. You can imagine what happened then. There was major layoffs. I remember to this day vividly the picture in my head because I sat near the chief engineer's office in the New Jersey office, and he had to lay off dozens and dozens of people that next day. And I wasn't one of them, but just watching that happen and see what it did to the morale of the company, I was asking myself, well, how did they let this happen? How did they let the company get so focused on one project, one client, that this would happen? And what I took away from that, and I believe to this day, is whether it's your own career, your own skill sets, or it's a company, you always need to be diversifying, right? Yes, you'll always have some core things that are very important to you, but you really can't put all your eggs in one basket as a company or as an individual. And that's the importance of being agile and dynamic in your life and in your business and how you view things. And again, it ties into that whole future focus theme, which is very, very relevant as well to dealing with sustainability and things like climate change, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, things like that, that really require you to constantly be looking at the latest information and trying to be ready for the fact that it may be very different in the near future, and certainly will be very different in the long future. While I was also at Dewberry, I also really cemented my love for environmental issues. And there were a few projects I did there that were environmental in nature, but not enough to really keep me really passionate about staying there long term. So I went to law school at night. I decided to go to Rutgers Law School at night in Newark. And that was on my own nickel. The company had nothing to do with it. And I studied environmental law thinking that, well, maybe I'll stay in engineering, maybe I won't. But learning more about environmental regulations and all the rules and requirements that tie into environmental issues. And trust me, there are many. If you haven't gotten a flavor for that yet, every city, every state, every country is completely different. They may share some similarities, but their rules and the way they administer their rules are very different. And I got a sense for that going to law school, but I also got a sense for advocacy, the fact that you need to be able to put yourself in the position of your clients, even in cases where you don't agree with them. They may not even be really nice people or good organizations, but they still deserve to be represented. And you need to be able to take their position and understand why they do what they do, why they feel the way they feel, even if you personally may feel differently. And that's a huge lesson that I took away from going to law school. Then I went to Louis Berger in the early to mid 90s after that short stay with Dewberry. I was there for 28 years, really moved up the chain, started at project management level and then became a department manager, then became a operational manager, eventually became the president of the US company and became a board member at Louis Berger, ultimately selling to WSP a few years ago, which is where I am now. But while I was at Louis Berger, I finished my law degree. I looked at becoming an environmental lawyer or staying at Louis Berger. And by the time I finished my law degree and passed the bar, the world had changed a lot in the environmental world, and sustainability and was really starting to become a thing in the mid 90s. And resilience wasn't quite there yet, but it was also just starting to become something people talked about. And so I figured, well, this is a great opportunity to maybe become an environmental lawyer and do brownfields and get into environmental issues on the corporate side, maybe. But it was interesting. I interviewed with several law firms and one corporate opportunity. And in almost every case, they would ask me about what I was doing at Louis Berger and what kind of clients I had and kind of relationships I had. And they would kind of say something along the lines of, well, why do you want to become a lawyer? I mean, you're 10 years into your career at this point. You're going to have to become a first-year lawyer and start way at the bottom. It's not an easy life. And one of the lawyers who interviewed me said, Tom, I want your job. Why do you want my job? I mean, it sounds like you love what you do and you're good at it and you're making a difference at a good company. Why do you want to be a lawyer? And so there's a lot of lessons in there, including the grass isn't always greener. When you think about jumping jobs and that maybe you can make a better place for yourself within the job you have. And that's what I did. I used the fact that I had my law degree and had other opportunities to say to Louis Berger, listen, I want an opportunity. I'm not asking you to hand me anything, but what will it take for me to get to executive level? Tell me, give me a list, tell me whatever the metrics are. And if I do it, you will make me, an executive as soon as I do it. And so to their credit, and my boss's credit in particular, who later became the CEO of Louis Berger, he laid that out. And within a year and a half, I had done everything he gave me on the list. And that included building for Louis Berger in the New York metro area, New York and New Jersey in particular, a portfolio of environmental clients. And a big part of that actually was building in the capability of not just doing traditional environmental and brownfields, but also the other parts that were starting to become important, including sustainability, environmental management systems, climate change, disaster response and recovery, and things like that. And I was able to successfully do that and really plant the seeds for a growing business that became actually the engine of the U.S. part of Louis Berger's growth for the next 10 or so years. And so, what I would say to you in terms of advice as you go out and you start working with other companies, whether or in the public sector, always think about, even if your job isn't what you would like it to be today, try and take responsibility and put something out there. Be proactive and constructive about, well, can I make this a place where I can stay long term, where I can make it my own and be proud of it and build a team. That has a lot of advantages, including that, you stay with an employer for a longer time, you have more seniority, more longevity. That led, of course, to me becoming a shareholder and being able to take advantage of the sale of the company financially. So taking the long view, I often say, a couple things. Marathon, not a sprint, is one of my favorite sayings. And the career really is a marathon. You can't view it as a set of sprints. You have to look at it holistically as a marathon. I also often talk about, the tortoise and the hare is one of my favorite fables, where, don't be after the fast game, and just be focused on where you want to be. Have a long view, and that view can change, but you should have one, and you should try to stay focused on that goal. And I did. I always had as a goal to merge my engineering background with my environmental passion and my love for working with teams and building successful teams together, working collaboratively. And Louis Berger allowed me to do all of those things, really exceeding my wildest imagination of my time there. And so, I don't regret one bit. People ask me this all the time. I don't regret one bit not becoming a lawyer and staying in the engineering field, because of just the amazing, experiences that I had at Louis Berger. So of course, then that led to where I am now. I'm now at WSP, and this is most directly relevant to this seminar series and this topic of sustainability. And how do you put together a team? I was asked a few months back, in about October, November timeframe, by leadership at WSP to take all the different pieces of the U.S. company that were dabbling or a little more than dabbling in sustainability and resilience and climate change issues, bring it together under an executive leader, which I, of course, had gained a lot of experience in being a senior level executive, and how to successfully put teams together and mind the business and be profitable while you're also investing and growing. And they said, Tom, you've done it before. We want you to do it here. We want you to meet the moment in the marketplace, which is a red hot marketplace when it comes to sustainability right now, and all the ESG issues and all the investment interest in environmentally and sustainability oriented companies. Meet the moment for WSP, build something that we can brand around, because WSP is more known as a transportation and buildings infrastructure firm and one of the best in the world, but not as much known for this. And so what I did was I put together a couple of the pieces that are represented by these circles that already existed within the company, one of which was already reporting to me because I brought it in with me from Louis Berger, and that's the emergency management piece, the right-hand circle there. But then I took what we call our Future Ready program, which is a framework for training our own employees inside WSP, but also training our clients on how to, as I said earlier, get outside of the current mindset, the current codes the current standards and tools. Project yourself into the future. Don't be boxed in by it, and then start to make decisions and put ideas forth and develop solutions for your clients' challenges. And we're doing it for ourselves internally as well. We're walking the talk of Future Ready because we apply it to our own innovations internally and our own programs like social equity and justice, which is also a red hot area and is tied into, of course, the equity element of sustainability in the triple bottom line. And so that's a key element. Sustainability, energy, and climate change was a team that existed within the environmental sector at WSP, but it almost was acting like a boutique firm within a big firm. And they were very proud of their own family atmosphere and culture and almost viewed themselves as not really WSP. They have an acronym, SECC, and they call themselves by that. And so now they're under me, and I'm very quickly breaking them of that mindset. And I'm happy to say they get it. They're not SECC anymore. They're part of the Climate Resilience and Sustainability team, which in turn is part of the company. It cuts across the entire company. And that's the blue ovals in the background, and I'll get to that last in a minute. But then there's the resilience piece. So that was within what we called our advisory services part of the company. It's almost like a management consulting element within an engineering firm. And they work a lot for DOTs and other transportation clients. And it really built some nice resilience capabilities, but they were stuck. They were stuck in the same clients, again, with a real transportation emphasis. And so my job was to pull them out and teach them that, yeah, you're great at doing that for DOTs and for the Transportation Research Board and the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, really cutting edge stuff. But now you need to do that for other types of clients, both in the public and the private sector. And likewise with SCCC, they were mostly working for private sector firms, a who's who of Fortune 500 and even Fortune 10, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Bank of America, American Airlines, Goldman Sachs, on down the list. And they're just doing cutting edge or even bleeding edge type work for some of these corporations. And I'd be happy to answer some questions about that later. But the goal is now, okay, take that cutting edge stuff we're doing in the private sector and help our government clients, our infrastructure clients, to make themselves more sustainable and more climate change ready. And so that's what we're doing with them. And again, I mentioned the blue ovals in the background. These are the regions within the company, because we have a regional profit and loss center structure. And then the national business lines, I'm one of 7, cut across the regions. Then we also have a federal program, which I used to run up until taking this new job, the federal programs and logistics, which included the emergency management element. That's almost a 5th region. We have 4 geographic regions: the Northeast, Southeast, Central, and West. And then we have the federal programs region, which of course isn't a geographic region. It literally goes around the world, wherever the US government and US military have work. Trust me, we're working there all around the world. And then of course, there's the other business lines. We have to work with them because sustainability issues cut across everything by definition. They cut across power, they cut across transportation, buildings, the water, the management consulting advisory services element, and of course the federal and a few other elements. So it's that, and even the upper oval and the upper left-hand side, our corporate leadership and our support functions, even accountants, contract managers, HR representatives, a positive, high-performing company with regard to sustainability has to have everyone understanding what it means to be sustainable. And we are training our people in that as part of the Future Ready program. We're getting them used to, kind of the language of sustainability and resilience. And that's part of the education process. We're doing what we call ACE sessions within the company. And ACE stands for Align, Collaborate, and Educate. So I've done several of these now over the last month or so and where we're educating everyone on what it means to be sustainable and resilient, because it really does take the entire organization. If you really want to be at the highest level in sustainability, it can't just be a team off to the side that does sustainability. It has to be basically part of your DNA as an organization. So that's what we're doing. And you can see the tagline there, the vision statement and the mission statement that we developed for this new team. And it's all about collaboration. It's all about putting the future focus into how we do things and being ESG centric. ESG being the environment, social, and governance indicators that are being used a lot more now, especially in the private sector and the investment community. And so we're trying to get the company to get comfortable with just being a sustainability company. And I'm happy to say it's working, and we're having great success so far. We have a long way to go in our sustainability journey, as with our social equity and justice journey. But we're making great strides, and I'm very excited about the future. Lastly, I would say, you have an employer in your career, but you also have a network to mind. That network, you already have one, from your earlier days of education, friends, and if you've been part of other businesses already. But there's also, the leveraging of organizations, industry organizations, which I'm a huge fan of. And this list you see here on the screen are the organizations that our team, the Climate Resilience Sustainability team, are heavily involved in. And we do a good job of leveraging them both nationally and internationally. And the ones in the ovals are the ones where I'm a board member and I'm very active with. And in the case of the one at the top, I was one of the co-founders of it. It's an idea that I and one other person came up with, and then we sold it to the American Society of Civil Engineers, to the UK equivalent, ICE of the American Society of Civil Engineers, to the Global Covenant of Mayors on Climate and Energy, and to a non-government organization called the Resilient Shift. And the five of us became, including WSP, became the founding organizers of this new coalition, which was just launched a little over a year ago, and has rapidly gotten itself in position to be a real change agent and influencer in when it comes to climate change. And the way that this idea was spawned was when I would go to a lot of events, especially the big science and policy events tied to climate change. I would go and I would see lots of economists, scientists, policymakers, governmental reps, education, university representatives, researchers. I would see almost no engineers and engineering firms there. And yet we're the ones who know how to take science and policy and turn it into practical projects and solutions, make it happen. And a big gap in sustainability and climate adaptation and mitigation is there are lots of people putting big studies on the shelf, and they can't figure out how to get it past the study stage and into projects and being fundable, constructible, smart projects. And that's what engineers do. So the idea was born that we'd create this international coalition for sustainable infrastructure that would put engineers at the center. And it's not in lieu of others, but yes, put engineers at the center and invite scientists and others to be part of it too, and be action oriented and really try to figure out where are the gaps and barriers to sustainability and resilience that are just not being properly addressed. And let's use this international coalition, over 200,000 members just across ASCE and ICE alone, bring them to bear to solve these problems and bridge these gaps, break down these barriers to sustainability and resilience. And we're still a young organization, but we've got a lot of momentum going. And again, I'm happy to answer questions about that organization at the end. But you see some of the other organizations here that are tied to the different metrics that are out there now. that measure organizations and how committed are they to resilience and sustainability and ESG. And we're trying to promote the use of these internally, of course, to WSP. And I'm happy to say that WSP actually was rated by a few different organizations as the most sustainable engineering company. But we're also, of course, having to understand these things in the way they would apply to the different clients that we have in the private sector, because every client's at a different place in their sustainability journey. And so we have what we call, a 19-box sustainability service set, and it's in 5 different columns. And there's six boxes on the left-hand side, and then it goes to the right. And the boxes on the left-hand side are basically for the beginners, right? The organizations that are just starting their sustainability journey, doing things like just helping them to understand what their carbon footprint is, what are their greenhouse gas emissions, both direct and indirect, and how do you report those and be transparent about them? How do you come up with mitigation strategies to perform better once you understand how you're performing in these different metrics? And then you move across the set of boxes and you start doing things like, okay, now let's start looking at how you're organized. How do you govern yourself? How do you make decisions as a company? And what are the opportunity points, the milestones, if you will, in your business's kind of life cycle, where you can inject sustainability considerations into decision points, right? And then you move towards doing things about, adapting yourself, making yourself more resilient, and doing the same for people in your supply chain, or your clients, or both. And then, of course, at the very end, then you're really focused on becoming number one in your sector. And so Microsoft is our single biggest client, and they are doing things that very few other organizations are doing. For example, in greenhouse gas emissions, we were talking to them about their appetite for doing offsets and becoming net zero, and everything we were saying, they were saying, yep, we'll do that. And then they said, is there anything else we can do? And we said, well, I guess there's more we can do, but it may be a little crazy. I'm not sure we want to even say it. And say it, nothing's crazy. So what about what you've already done in the past? What about making amends for all the carbon that you've emitted since 1976, I think it was, when Microsoft was founded? And they kind of looked at us and said, that's a great idea. Yeah, we're going to do that. And literally over the last several months, we've been working with them on strategies, first quantifying, going all the way back, of their greenhouse gas emissions. And then what are the strategies, not just with offsets and purchasing them, but also within their business, using renewable energy, looking at their supply chain, everything else, ways that they could get to that net zero back to the founding date of the corporation. So that's just one example of kind of that bleeding edge kind of thing that really the private sector can do. It's harder for government organizations, of course, but that's just a great example of meeting people where they are, and organizations where they are in their sustainability journey, and then addressing what are the solutions that fit best for them. It's all about listening, right? It's all about asking questions. We had an internal training session last year where somebody said, think of it as 5 whys. Every time you talk to a client and you ask them, well, what would you like us to help you with? What's the challenge you want us to address with this project or this assignment you're giving us? And then when they tell you what that is, say, okay, now I want to understand why. And then when they answer the why, say, listen intently why they're saying they're doing it, but then pick an element within that why to ask another why. And really keep peeling back the layers of the onion until you understand the whole thing, the whole onion, right? And then start talking about what solutions you can bring. But don't do that until you have a full understanding of what they're facing, how they perceive it, and why they even want to ask you to do what they're asking you to do. And that's just a good way to approach all problems, actually, but certainly as a consultant, as a business organization, that's a great way to just understand your customer and give them what they need when they need it. Which, by the way, maybe you may have a solution to them today that actually they like, and then 6 months from now, it may not be good for them anymore or good enough for them anymore. So again, back to the agility, being dynamic, not being one and done in the way you think, in the way you solve problems. Constantly think about it again. How can we incrementally improve it even more than that first solution we provided? Always looking to learn and expand your horizons. So it applies to your own education, your own profession and career, but it also applies to organizations and to business in general. And so yeah, it's a great way, leveraging different kind of mindsets that these different organizations force you into and metrics, and using them to your advantage. And so that's why, even though you might think that's a long list, and by the way, this isn't the whole list, but every one of these organizations that we're involved in adds value, makes us a better company, makes us better sustainability professionals. The disaster recovery element at the bottom, that's a great example where you might not immediately think, well, that doesn't have anything to do with sustainability, maybe resilience, but not sustainability. But of course it does. How is it sustainable if you keep repairing the same infrastructure element over and over again, because when a flood occurs or a hurricane comes, it gets washed out or gets damaged? How is that sustainable? I mean, it's just not. And so even thinking in terms like that, most of the people who belong to DRCA, where I'm a board member, are just pure emergency response type people. But I keep preaching the gospel of, you really need to, as an organization, in an industry, to really think more broadly. And this is where things are going. There's a lot more grants now for resilience and disaster mitigation that require, for example, social equity and community involvement and having multi-agency collaboration to score points to get federal grants under like the FEMA BRIC program, which stands for Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. Billions and billions of dollars are going to flow through these federal grant programs, and to compete for them, you really need to think more broadly as a government or as an organization that deals in emergency response and disaster recovery.